It's Backstage Pass with Steve Ryan. And here's your host, Steve Ryan.
It's Backstage Pass with Steve Ryan, and you might not recognize my next guest, but you should. He's been called the Minister of Groove. He's huge in the music industry. He's one of the most respected and award-winning drummers around. Throughout his 30-year career, he's been consistently voted the #1 R&B drummer by music industry publications. He's toured with some of the biggest names in music that include Lenny Kravitz, Bobby Brown, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, New Edition, Jody Watley, Philip Bailey with Earth, Wind, and Fire, and many others. Please welcome motivational speaker, author, musician, Zoro to Backstage Pass.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me, man. Glad to be here.
I'm so thrilled to talk to you. I've been doing a little bit of prep for this time that we're going to spend together. And honestly, I'm not exactly sure where to start because you've done so much and you're still doing so much. And I want to try to cover a lot of that. And you've got a new book out that I want to dive into. But this is a music podcast, so let's start with music if you don't mind, and
Sure.
then we'll just kind of go from there. I know that, I mean, you've been around for 30 years, and I was looking at the number of people that you've played with, and very diverse. I mean, if you talk about Lenny Kravitz. You've got, the R&B side with Bobby Brown and Jody Watley and, Philip Bailey, but then Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons.
All right, everybody out there, get ready to sing. Get ready to sing. Grease is the word. Everybody, listen to the group. Can you sing?
I mean, tell me where your influences come from.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I grew up in a family of 7 siblings, and my mother, Maria, who I wrote the book about, Maria Scarf, she was from Mexico. And my mother absolutely loved music. Like, music was just a part of her soul. So I grew up in a household that everybody in my family loved music, but everybody loved different music. So my mother loved, like, all the big band crooners, like Frank Sinatra was her favorite,
Yeah.
Dean Martin, Bing Crosby, and then mariachi music from her native Mexico. Then my older siblings, they loved soul music, R&B, and then my older sister loved rock and roll, like Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and the Doors and the Stones. And so I really grew up, even though no one was a musician in my home, everyone was a big, strong music lover. And so my taste in music were shaped by my siblings, because when you're a kid, you have no choice in what you're listening to. You just listen to whatever your brothers and sisters play, and so all of that kind of put inside of me like a love, a diversity, a love for a diverse body of music, which then naturally, when I became a drummer, I didn't think of things like I'm a rock drummer, I'm a jazz drummer, I'm a funk drummer. I'm just a musician. And I love all these styles of music, and I want to play all these styles of music. And I played a lot of jazz in my career too, and jazz fusion and Latin. And to me, there's only one style of music, and there's only 2 styles, good and bad, right? So,
Right. And that's subjective.
yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Why did you choose drums?
Drums chose me. anybody who plays an instrument would be foolish to think that they chose it. In other words, we can't give ourselves rhythmic DNA, or I can't make myself have vocal talent, or I can't, the things that we have, we're drawn to, they're given to us. Like, so rhythm is something that was just in me from when I was born. The first concert my mother provided a way for me to see was actually a neighbor lady who got us the tickets, but she saw that I had this propensity for rhythm because I was always banging on things and making noise. And I made a ghetto drum set when we lived in Compton out of like Folgers coffee cans, almond roca cans, some oatmeal boxes, salad spoons, and put them in my wagon in Compton Boulevard, turned on the transistor radio, and was imagining that I was a drummer. And so people saw that, and so they took me to see Diana Ross and the Supremes and the Temptations in concert, like when I was 7, and it was like life changing. Then when I was 12, my mother took me to see Frank Sinatra in concert, and that was equally as life changing. So I think the DNA of a drummer was just already in me from birth. And it's sort of my own philosophical outlook. But I believe the gifts that we have that are given to us by God, we're born with them. We don't earn them. And then life is just about discovering what's already there. It's about uncovering what's there because this sense of rhythm was already in me. All I had to do was hear rhythm, and I was drawn to it. So from the earliest age I can remember, anytime I heard rhythm or something going on with drums or percussive, man, I was drawn to it. So I had no choice in the matter. Because if I could choose it, I would have wished I was a great vocalist, right? And some people go, well, I would choose to be an incredible athlete or an incredible writer. But we don't really get to choose our gifts, which is why they're called gifts. They're given to us. Now we can do something with them, or we cannot do something with them. And a lot of us don't like our gifts, so then we don't do anything with them. But I think that everybody has something, and you just have to recognize what are you better at, what comes more natural to you than other people. Like in other words, in school, are you better at math? Are you better at science? Are you better at writing? Like we all have natural propensities to excel in certain areas, and all we got to do is embrace them. So I just embraced the rhythmic thing. And once I connected with playing the drums for the first time, I didn't even start until I was really 16 when I got a real drum set. But man, the minute I started, I envisioned what I've been doing for the last 40 years. Like I saw it, like I'm going to be on stage, I'm going to be playing, I'm going to be making people, I'm going to bring joy to people through the gift of rhythm.
Yeah, that's so powerful too, and you hear that with a lot of creative people or people. It doesn't have to be in the arts either. People who are very successful, and you talk to them, and they say, I every day I looked in the mirror and I said, I'm going to do this,
Yeah.
and you just channel it, and
Yeah.
that's very powerful.
Yeah, I mean it's a simple thing really. It's like the most powerful thing a human being has been given. Besides, it's actually even more powerful than the gift you've been given. The gift you've been given is extremely powerful, but there are people that just based on sheer will, vision, and determination with very minimal gifting succeeded greatly at something because they convinced themselves they could. So the greatest gift I think God gave humanity is the gift of imagination, the ability to imagine something or believe in something with all your heart. And then if you're willing to put your, nose to the grindstone and work it and refuse to give up, you can see that vision or belief or dream come to life. And sometimes it's not all hinging on the talent because as you and I know, there are many people in rock and roll who made it who weren't really that talented, but man, they were driven and determined. And a lot of the people that are super talented are the people that never did anything with it.
Right.
So vision and belief and imagination are everything. Even Albert Einstein said that, imagination is everything.
Yeah. What do you, not to put you on the spot, but do you prefer the, R&B or rock and roll, or, where are you at? Or do you, it just equally
I love
love
it
it just as much?
all.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I look at it like food. Like I love sushi and Japanese food, but then I love pasta and Italian food.
Yeah.
And then I love, Indian food. I love all kinds of food. And just as with food, but I think I'd be bored every day if every day I ate sushi. You
Right.
know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I feel the same way with music, is that I love R&B, but then I get into different moods where like all of a sudden I'll get into like a movie soundtrack mood, and I just want to listen to beautiful, beautiful epic scores, John Williams scores and John Barry, and and then, and I'll be into that for like a month or two, and then I'll get into like, man, Latin, and then, like and
Right.
that can go from day to day. not just like sometimes I'll get into periods where I'm just really into something for a period. And I'm the kind of guy who I'm like all in. Like if I want to study an artist, like whoever, like James Brown or something, I'm the kind of guy who has to have every single James Brown album to then know what are the masterpieces, not just
Right.
go get the greatest hits collection. But so I've in my lifetime I've collected over like 15,000 CDs of music, like actual compact discs, and hundreds of albums and thousands of downloads. So I'm just a music. Before I was a drummer, I was a music fan, and I still am a drummer, but I'm still a music fan. Like but I have to have a variety because I'll get bored if it's like some people listen to the same type of stuff over and over. They get stuck in
Right.
their 80s rock or whatever their high school period was, and then they never evolve and they never listen to anything else. I kind of like variety. And
Yeah.
so when I'm playing music, when I practice every day, I'll just put on different playlists of different feels. Like, oh man, today I feel like big band. Like I feel like slamming out some big band jazz, or today I totally feel Latin, or I feel reggae. And so it's kind of always evolving,
Yeah.
and I'm always growing. I feel like I'm better now than I was 2 years ago, than I was 10 years ago. I look back at footage of me playing in the day with whoever, Bobby Brown. And I kind of go like, wow, how was it that I was able to play back then? I was so young and it sounded good, but like now I'm so much more mature.
Right.
Like, I always had passion and like a drive and determination when I played. But then what you get when you get older is you get that tempered with wisdom, and you get that tempered with taste and touch and things that grow that you cannot get any other way except through time itself.
Right. Right. I
Writers are
was
that way too.
Yeah, I was talking a few weeks ago with Gary Peterson, the drummer of the Guess Who, and he said something very similar about when he goes back and listens to their older stuff. He thinks he's a better musician now than he was then, but they had so much fun.
Yeah.
And sometimes he listens to it and kind of cringes. Oh, why did I do that kind of thing?
Oh yeah. I'm always cringing because there's always a couple of things that keep something from being totally perfect. Or you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
oh, if I would have just did that lick instead of that lick. I mean, sometimes there's performances where I go, yeah, but we're our worst critics, artists. Even like with my memoir that's coming out, like it's almost 400 pages of writing. And man, I was making tweaks to the very, very last
Yeah.
second. And I probably would just continue to tweak forever if they didn't
Right.
tell me to stop at some point, because there's always something where you go, oh man, that word would have been a better word, but I didn't think of that word today.
Right. Right.
Just I
Yeah.
think that's everybody. And at some point, you just have to put something to bed and go, this is the best I could do at this time, because in a year from now, I could do better.
Right.
Right. So at some point, you just have to accept that this is the benchmark of the best you were able to do at this season of your life. And that season changes.
Right. Yeah. Talking about visioning success and what you want to do, and sometimes success is achieving what you want to do, not necessarily financially.
Yeah.
And when I was a young child, I can't remember when, I always wanted to be a disc jockey on the radio. I would get my little 45s out and I would talk over the intro just like I heard them
Yeah.
do on the radio. And eventually I became a disc jockey and a music director on radio stations. And what's ironic about our conversation is when I was a music director, Lenny Kravitz,
Yeah.
Jody Watley, New Edition, Bobby Brown. Those were songs I was playing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And those artists, a lot of people ask me, who's your favorite artist that you played with, and I mean, I have special connections with different people at different times for different reasons, but like, I loved them all, like, and I feel like it's been an honor to be able to play. I mean, this was my dream of becoming whatever a world-renowned drummer was an absolute long shot. I mean, considering number one, I didn't start until I was 16. That's a very late start. All the guys I know that were really great, they had sticks in their hands when they're 3 years old, and
Right.
and just from the impoverished situation that I came from with a single immigrant mother raising 7 children alone. And at one point we lived in a car and we lived in a tent, and it's like my life story is like the full on Rudy Rocky Blindside meets Forrest Gump, but it's about a drummer. And the fact that any of it has happened at all is a miracle and is something that I totally remain grateful for. I mean, like even like playing with like somebody like Frankie Valli. I mean, I grew up listening to those songs. That was one of my mother's favorite groups, and to be able to play for. Then I got to play with Lisa Marie Presley. I was a huge Elvis fan, and then the fact that I became friends with the King's daughter and was the first drummer to ever record with her. Those are things that I never take any of it for granted. I'm still the same kid on the cover of my memoir with my mother. I've never lost that childlike wonder of anything I do. Everything to me is amazing. Everything is wondrous. I still feel like I'm a kid inside, and I think that's a cool thing because we can get jaded, we can get pompous and arrogant and prideful and all that. And who does that help? The people who have inspired me the most were great musicians who were humble and
Yeah.
and were grateful, and they made me feel, and in their humility they made me feel like I could do it too,
Right.
just because of the way they carried themselves. And so I see it all as a gift, and I see it all as an opportunity. I mean, I wrote, there was this book called Sticks and Skins, and I wrote the forward to it. And it's like a big table picture book of famous drummers and coffee table book. And one of the things I wrote was when I was playing with the new edition in 1985. In fact, that the story is how I open up my memoir, Maria's Scarf. I open up the memoir with this story. It's 1985, Washington, D.C., in front of the National Monument, and I'm playing before a sea of humanity. It's 4th of July. The concert is being televised on Showtime. My mother's going to be watching in L.A., and I'm looking out at this crowd that's looks like the scene from the Ten Commandments of the Exodus of the Jewish people. It's just people everywhere. It's not a venue where there's 100,000 people. It's outdoors, so it's a million people, like those Million Man marches, right? So I'm looking out there and I'm playing with New Edition. I'm playing the song Mr. Telephone Man, and there's a drum breakdown towards the end of the song where it's just the drums.
I just can't take anymore. Telephone man, wrong with my life. Found my baby stuck back. Click every time. Telephone man, wrong with my life. Found my baby stuck back. Click every time. Telephone man, wrong with my life. Found my baby stuck back. Click every time. Telephone.
And I thought, what power have I been given that I can wield this power with two little pieces of wood, little sticks. I have the power to command a whole million people to sway at a certain time. And if I stop, they stop. Like it was this supernatural power that I realized I'd been given. And I talk about that in the book in the beginning, and I say that my mother always said that I was given a great gift, and it was the gift to bring joy to others through the power of rhythm. And uh, and then at the end of that intro, I say something like, based on our, impoverished conditions of living and being abandoned by my father and no money and moving around 40 times by the time I'm in the fourth grade, I said something like, the world said I would never amount to anything. My mother said that all things are possible to those who believe. I believed my mother. This is our story. And so it's this epic moment of realizing that I'm 22 years old, and now is the beginning of living my dream. But the whole point is it's two little pieces of wood. And with that, you have this power to make a lot of people happy and to make people dance and make people stop dancing, because the minute the groove stops. So I don't know, it was a revelation. It was an epiphany that, man, and so I thought, what better way to spend my life than to use these gifts that bring people joy, because music, it has this inexplicable joy. I mean, that's why we all love music. Of all the art forms God gave to man, nothing is deeper than music, because you can hear a song from when you were 12 years old, Steve, and you'll remember exactly where you lived, what your bicycle you were riding, what clothes you were wearing, what your house smelled like. Like music makes a spiritual, physical, psychological imprint on your psyche that no other art form does. I can watch a movie now, and a year from now, I'll be watching it again, and it'll take me halfway through the movie. I go, oh, I think I've seen this,
Right.
But a song, you
Right.
remember exactly when that song came out and what you were driving and what you were doing. There's no other art form like music. So to me, my heart of gratitude is like, wow, I've been given this great gift, and I've been one of the lucky ones that's been able to do it for 40 years now. around the world with various different kinds of artists and still doing it. And I've gotten to do more expressions. I've got to become a writer and a speaker, and those are all things that bring me the same level of joy that drumming does.
Yeah, beautiful. You, speaking of being a speaker, you're a Christian motivational speaker, and I had read that, you speak at churches and festivals all over the world. Tell me about that and that passion in you.
Yeah, well, number one, it's like I'm a Christian motivational. I guess I would say I'm a Christian, but I'm just a motivational speaker because I realized my biggest call in my life, and many people have told me this, people who have heard me speak, they would say, and they would say to me like this, I don't mean to offend you. You're a great drummer, and I love your music, but your ability to inspire and encourage people is like off the charts. Like you touched my soul with your words or your stories. So I take that as a great compliment that it's that, because there's nothing more powerful in this world than words. Words are the most powerful thing we have. Our lives are shaped and formed by the very words either spoken to us or the words we speak to ourselves. So words are powerful. But my passion for that is that I realized that the drumming and all these things were just a gift and I've been fortunate to live this dream of a life, right? So my greater joy is to how many lives can I inspire and impact with my life, with what I've learned, with my experiences, because ultimately there's only two ways to live your life. You either live a life of self or you live a life of service. And if you haven't surrendered to God and you don't understand the bigger picture of life, then you will most likely live a life of self. But when you live a life of self, you will inevitably self-destruct because we weren't meant to serve ourselves. And that's why all the people that do end up self-imploding because there's only so much you can feed your flesh before it destroys itself, right? But if you understand that your life is a gift from God used to serve others, then you'll find purpose in life. You'll find the meaning of life. You'll find depth because we come most alive when we know we're making a difference. When I have never met one self-centered person who was happy, and I've met lots of them, not one. But when you meet people that are using their life to serve others, you find people full of joy. And it has nothing to do with how rich they are, how famous they are. It has to do with them walking in their purpose and walking in their calling. So for me, and I've spoken everywhere, like I've spoken to the most hardened criminals at San Quentin, and I had grown men coming up to me crying and weeping, and they said from my words, and these are guys that are all tatted up. These are murderers, and I've spoken in the jungles of Ghana, Africa, and I've spoken at Hollywood backstage parties, Oscar parties, Grammy parties. So I've spoken to the lowest of the low, and I've spoken to the highest of the high. And so it's my calling is to make a difference. The drums is what gave me the platform to then become this because I'm sharing from that platform, that perspective, and usually even when I speak in the prisons, I'll do a drum solo first and play along to a tune, and then that captures their attention, and now they want to hear what I have to say. But what I always have to say is look, you've been given this life. Each of us gets 24 hours a day. Nobody gets more, nobody gets less. It's about what we make of it. And God has a plan and purpose for your life. He gave you giftings that He wants you to develop. He wants you. And so I wrote another book called Soar, and it's a book about how you discover your gifts, because we're here to discover our gifts, and then we're here to develop our gifts, because you have to develop what you have. Everything that God gives you, He gives you in the form of a seed. It's the seed of potential. He doesn't give it to you fully grown. Just like we don't arrive on the planet fully grown. We arrive as infants and then we grow. Well, our gifts are the same way. But the whole purpose is discover your gift, develop it so you can deploy it, so you can then use it, because you are most alive when you are exercising your gift for humanity in some kind of way. And that has nothing to do with success, is really walking in your calling and making a difference and doing what you were meant to do, what you were created to do. That's the most successful person in the world. Whatever world trappings come from that is irrelevant, because not everyone will be rich and famous. But there are a lot of people that are rich and famous that aren't walking in their calling because they knew they should have been a school teacher or whatever their deal was. And they really come alive only when you're doing that thing. So my joy is to help inspire people to discover that, and also just to encourage them and to motivate them in the direction in their life, and also to help them overcome. Life is tough for all of us. It's a struggle down here, But I see my life purpose is to glorify God. And how do I glorify God? I glorify Him by living a life of excellence in which I made a difference to humanity. Because when I die, it's not going to be like, I'm not going to be able to say, hey, God's going to judge all of us. And He's going to say, what did you do with your life? And I can't just say, well, I was a world-renowned drummer. I was voted #1. He goes, sit down. That was for free. I gave you that. But what did you do with it? In other words, whose life got better because I was alive? Who got inspired by me personally, not just by my music, but by their encounters with me? Was I a jackass, or was I kind? Was I prideful, or was I approachable? That's the part that we have to control over. Is like, what did you do with it? And ultimately, how did you conduct yourself, realizing that all this was a gift from the king? You're just a landlord. Like, so I view everything that God gave me, it's a gift from him. I'm just a steward. I'm just a property manager. And so I'm trying to take good care of the property, because one day the owner's going to come back and say, show me what you've done with all my properties.
Right.
That's my philosophy of why I do what I do. And ultimately it gives me a lot of joy to touch lives and to know that I've inspired people in their worst moments. And I've been responsible for people climbing to the highest heights because of something I said, wrote, or an encounter with me.
Yeah, that's deep stuff if you dig into it. I was thinking as you were talking about that, and what people do with their gifts and their success, and you're exactly right. There's a lot of very successful people in we'll say the music industry that are very unhappy. They've achieved all the goals they were trying to achieve, and it wasn't the happiness that they thought they were going to get from it, I suppose. I at one time was a promotion manager for Polygram Polydor Records, and I met a lot of artists, some of the most unkind people I've ever met.
Yeah.
And they're doing what they thought was their dream, and they just come across as the most unhappy people you've ever been around.
Well, and my answer for that, and that could be in any profession. That could be people that are politicians, people that are actors, people that are anybody who's, successful in the field can have that same unhappiness. And what I've pinned it down to is very, very simple, but it goes over most people's heads. And that is that God created mankind for one reason and one reason only. He created them to have fellowship with himself. So we are spiritual beings. Whether we believe in spiritual things or not, we are a spirit being. Our flesh is just what we look at. But the Steve that I'm looking at, the Zoro that you're looking at, but inside the tent of our exterior flesh is a soul, is a spirit. And that spirit was meant to have communion with God. And so when we try to live our life and God is not in it, we are these empty vessels because he reserved a place in our soul that was only reserved for his spirit. In other words, the world in itself cannot fill it. There's a void in there that no amount of sex, drugs, rock and roll, power, or fame has been able to fulfill that part of the human being where apart from God, they're full. Because we've known all these people, you and I, that had all those things. And I mean, look at everyone from Elvis to, all people. You can think of a million people who kind of died sadly or killed themselves because they were doing things and there was no space for God in their soul. So they were going, all this, and I'm still not fulfilled, because I believe he created us with an emptiness inside of us that could only be filled with his actual presence. But that would have to be by invitation from us. And so we have to go, hey, I've tried everything. And you'll see that. And sometimes you'll like Jim Carrey, I just saw something about him and he said, man, I struggled, I succeeded, I did all these things, but I realized I was empty. And then I found Jesus. And that filled the void that the rest of the stuff didn't fill. And that's the problem is we're trying to fill it with earthly things that are temporal, and all those things are fading. They're dying. But the things that are inside us that are forever are the spiritual things. And so I think people are longing for a relationship with Christ. They are longing for a relationship with God, but the world tells them all you need to do is be rich and famous and have more drugs and more sex and more power, and then you'll be happy. But it's a lie because no one who ever has it is. So I just think we're a spiritual being and we're never going to be happy. And I also think we're just passing through, right? We don't live on earth eternally. So our home address is heaven. And in a way, we're all longing for this other world without sin and without destruction and without hate and bitterness and all the things that are on the earth. We're longing for a home address. There's a GPS tracker in us, and we sense it and we feel it, but we just don't know how to get to it. But it's simpler than most people think. And that is that you just ask Jesus into your heart. And then when he comes, the void is filled, and you begin. And this is this journey I've been on for most of my life, is that because if you try to accomplish all those things and God's not with you, then you will have emptiness. But if God is with you, then all those things will have purpose, because then you'll see the purpose in them is to touch and inspire and love other people. Because I'm a father. Nothing pleases me more than to see if my children are kind to each other. Well, how do you think God feels? Nothing pleases God more than to see his children love one another and help one another. And so that's where the joy comes, is when you realize, okay, I'm doing all these incredible things I dreamt of doing, but now I'm getting the fulfillment because I understand their divine purpose. And that's a different way of living, right?
Right, exactly. You also you work a lot with youth. You're a spokesperson for Big Brothers Big Sisters, but you also have the Zoro International Ministries. Tell me about that passion.
Yeah, well, so I had always had a passion for speaking to young people and young kids. I was in the Big Brother Big Sister program when I was like, between 12, no, but between like I think 10 to 14, I was in that program. And I was in many different programs that my mother put me in because we were underprivileged and didn't have a lot of opportunities. And these programs provided love and encouragement and experiences that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So I think because I was loved on by those people and inspired and encouraged and mentored, it birthed within me a heart to do that later for other people. And also from the rejection and the poverty and the abandonment issues I grew up with and the bullying, it made me have compassion for others. And so I simply, when I go out there and speak to kids, I'm simply giving them what I wish that I had received from my own father, which I never did. So it was easy for me to be a loving father figure because I was just pouring back into myself as a young boy, right? And so I ended up speaking for Big Brothers Big Sisters, for the Head Start organization, for Compassion International, a Christian organization. I was speaking at underprivileged city schools and churches and conferences. And then eventually that led to me starting my own ministry, which is Zoro International Ministries, which is just a Christian nonprofit that would allow other people to sow money into my ministry so I could go do all those things for free. So if somebody called me to speak at a prison or a church or a kids youth group camp, I didn't have to worry about money because other people were sowing money into it so that because it would take all of my time to do these things, right? And so if I'm not playing drums making money, then I got to do something. So I started the ministry so people could get behind me and go, hey, Zorro's good ground. Wherever he goes, he's making a difference. So that way I could say yes to everything. And I've said yes to everything, even when people weren't sowing money into my ministry. That's just who I am. But it makes it easier when you have financial partners that go, hey, we want to back you because we know everywhere you go, you're going to make a difference. And that's my heart. Everywhere I go, I do make a difference because I'm very intentional about it. But I love that because that's, and that leads into like, why I wrote Maria's Scarf, my memoir, is because a lot of people, it's about to come out April 30th, and a lot of people have asked me, what inspired you to do that, or why did you do that? Number one, it took me 15 years to write, but I've actually been writing it for 50 because I started a diary at the age of 10 and I kept writing into my 20s. So literally, I've been writing this book for 50 years, right? But the reason why I really worked hard on it the last 15 is I feel like it's the most important thing I've accomplished in my life career because the drumming is only going to affect so many people. There's only so many concerts I'm going to do for the rest of my life. The speaking, there's only going to be so many personal engagements I can do. I'm 61 before I check out in this earth, right? There's only so many one-on-one encounters I'm going to have with people at the airport, wherever I run into people, right? There are a limited amount that I have left, right? But a book is something that could go around the world between the ebook, the physical book, and the audio book is something that could permeate and touch hearts in places I'll never be. It will be in the hands and hearts of people all around the world that I'm never going to get to speak there. I'm never going to get to meet them. And also it will live well past me. It will go on as long as the world is here. in some format. So I thought this is the greatest thing I have to offer to people is this beautiful, heartfelt story of this love between a mother and a son, this immigrant mother who raised me, who filled my heart with dreams and who had faith in God that we would make it, and about this unbreakable bond of this family, these seven brothers and sisters who fought for each other's survival, and then me, the starry-eyed kid with the dream who refused to give up on it. And so it's a story. When people ask me to describe it in 4 words, I would say that it is heartwarming, heartbreaking, hilarious, and hopeful. And so it will touch people's hearts in a profound way, but you will leave with hope. There's one woman who finished reading the manuscript the other day in her 50s, and she said, your book makes me want to dream again, makes me want to go after the impossible, after unattainable things, because the things that happened in my life were the impossible, were unattainable. So if they can happen for me, they can happen for anybody because I'm no more special than the next person. But what we need for inspiration in this world is the same thing we've always used for inspiration, and that is stories. They say mankind lives off of food, clothing, and shelter, right? We've heard that all our life. That's not entirely true. There's a fourth element that we cannot survive without, and that is story. We make sense of humanity through story. That's why we have cave drawings, and that's why we have the Bible and other religious writings. Everything that we make sense of humanity is through stories either written or passed down or said. But when we're at work and we're at lunchtime, we're telling stories. We live off of story. And so I thought the most powerful way to communicate an idea in today's world is through the power of storytelling. So I worked extremely hard, read over 300 books, was rejected over 100 times by different publishers and marketing teams and agents, but I knew the vision God gave me. I knew that I was supposed to do this book. Now I just received the physical finished book that's coming out in a month, and it is so stunningly beautiful. But the words in there are already touching people. There's a couple people at my church that started reading it, and they're like, "Oh my God, like this book is so." But I'm not boasting in any way. I'm trying to encourage people that when God gives you a dream and a vision, your only job is to not give up on it. And he gives it to you for a reason because it will do something to touch and inspire other people. Whether that dream was to open a restaurant or a shelter for people, everyone has different dreams. But essentially, all those dreams, if they're from God, they're going to benefit humanity in some way. And I couldn't think of anything better to have a legacy in my life than here's what I learned on this journey, and here's what would help you. And you don't have to be a drummer or a musician. You just have to be a person with a pulse and have a heart, And so that's what drove me past all the doubt, past all the rejection, and drove me to learn the skill to be able to tell this story in a really compelling way. Because writing a memoir is way different than writing a motivational book. Writing a motivational book is like being a pediatrician. Writing a memoir is like being a neurosurgeon. It's a whole different level of medicine. And I had to study that craft for 15 years. But I am glad that it did not come out any other time in the 15 years that I wanted it to, because it would not be what it is now. Now it's written through the eyes of a 61-year-old man, not a 45-year-old man. And I've got the tempering and the seasoning and the vulnerability because I don't care anymore, right? So you can be honest and you can be truthful and not ashamed and not afraid to share things. So anyway, that's all these things led me to the journey of the book, the drumming, the speaking, the other motivational books, the ministry, and then what is the greatest thing and the greatest weapon I have to transform the most amount of lives is a written word and an audio book.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. And that comes out next month in April.
April
Yeah, or
30th.
April 30th. And so I'm assuming Amazon and all the
Yeah.
the regulars. Are you doing a pre-sale? Is it pre-sale started yet?
Yeah, it already, in fact, I was very blessed to find out it had reached #1 on Amazon's
Beautiful.
pre-release list of hot new soul and artist biographies. It has been bouncing between 1 and 10 for quite a while. So yeah, it's already available for pre-order on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, Audible, all the digital platforms, both as the ebook, as the ebook, the physical book, and the audio book. And the audio book came out incredible. Blackstone Publishing, my publisher, they're one of the top audiobook publishers in the world. That's how they started like 30, 40 years ago. So yeah, I got a beautiful audiobook, the ebook and the physical book. Yeah, so people can pre-order it now. And then my website to find out more about me and the book is just zorothedrummer.com, just Zoro with one R, zorothedrummer.com. And on there's a link, it says memoir, and it takes you to the whole site within the site. It has all the stuff about Maria's scarf, my memoir. Yeah, but it's already been pre-selling like a lot. And I'm super excited. And the other vision that God gave me that I'm currently pursuing already, and my agents are pitching it, is it's always been envisioned as a movie. It's like a Rocky Rudy Blindside kind of movie, only about a drummer, and a Netflix series because it's very episodic in nature. And everyone who's read it without me telling them that has said, "My God, the minute I read it, this feels like a movie. This should be a movie or a series." So that's the next thing. But it's a lot easier to have a great movie and a Netflix series when you've written a great manuscript, because then just taking that from the page and taking it to the stage,
Yeah.
you know. And so
Yeah.
that's where all the real work was. And how do I always knew I had a compelling story, but how do you write it in a compelling manner? You have to learn character arc and dialogue and scene and setting and through lines and themes and all this stuff that, you got to be a seriously trained writer to do that well. And that's what the last 15 years was self-training myself.
Well, I hope everyone will go and do a pre-order on that. And is your website where they can go to support your international ministries as well?
That is zoroministries.org. So Zoro ministries spelt out .org. And that's where if people want to see what I do ministry wise and see the vision and the partner plan on there, and there's a donate page, and that's where people can partner with me, because this book is about to open up a lot of huge doors for me to speak into many, many places
Yeah.
more than ever before. But most of those places don't have the money to pay me to come. And so that's what people would be sewing into is, hey, we want Zoro to reach all these people that nobody would take the time to go and reach,
Right.
and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it with or without them, but it's a lot easier to do it with support than without.
Yeah. Well, I hope people will go and support you. And I'm real excited to read this book and the next book that you have coming up. I can't tell you what a thrill this conversation has been. I didn't know exactly where we were going to go with it, and I'm completely blown away and pleased. And I hope that somewhere down the line, maybe when you're getting ready for the new book to come out, we can sit down and talk about that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do this anytime. I mean, like, to me, this is a great joy, a great honor, a great privilege to be on your podcast. And I don't take any invitation lightly. I pour my heart into every. I'm this kind of guy who says yes to everything. And by saying yes to everything, I have said yes to the littlest doors that has somehow magically led to the biggest doors. And I see all of them as equal value, just the way I see people. I've ministered to Denzel Washington, and I've ministered to the lowest of the low that no one will ever see or know, to criminals, to murderers, to Hollywood stars. And to me, I give them the same heart, the same attention, the same value, because they're all God's children and they all are equally valued in his eyes. Unfortunately, in society, people don't look at it that way. And so they go, oh, I'm only going to do this TV show or this podcast or this interview or this speaking thing, or I won't go there if there's not 1,000 people, or, I'm not going all the way to there to speak to 12 kids. I just say yes to everything. And then God does these extraordinary things where he opens up big, huge things that I could never get myself into. Because I think he just looks at your heart. And if you're willing to do his work, he just opens up huge doors for you because you're willing to stoop down through the small doors of anything, so take that for people for what it's worth. But it was a great joy and privilege for me to be on your show, and I look forward to doing it again. There's much more to talk about with everything, with the music, with the book, and I'll look forward to speaking to you when you read Maria's Scarf, after you read the memoir, because you'll have a lot more you'll want to talk about after you actually read the book. There's so much in there.
Yeah, let's plan it. I appreciate you. I appreciate the time. I wish you nothing but success with the book and everything else you're working on. And I so look forward to that next conversation.
Thanks, Steve. It's been a joy. Take care and God bless, my friend. I appreciate you.
For questions or comments, email Steve at steveryan.songoftheday@gmail.com.